So out of everyone, who do you think is under the most pressure in the NFL playoffs?
So I'm going to go to the NFC here. And I'm going to say Drew Brees is under the most pressure. Now, let me tell you why. He's 40 years old. And when you look at the GOAT conversation, when you list your top quarterbacks, Drew Brees is usually just on the outside of that. You get Brady, Elway, Montana, and then kind of up for grabs. You could throw Brett Favre in there, whoever you want. But Brees is kind of on the outside. But he leads in a lot of records. Most passing yards, most passing touchdowns, career completion percentage, single game completion percentage. All these different stats. But why is Drew Brees not talked about in the same way as the Tom Bradys and the Joe Montanas? Because he only has one Super Bowl win. And in all of Sean Payton's time there, and his over 10 years as the head coach now, they've only been to one Super Bowl. Granted, they won it. But for all the talk coming out of New Orleans and the great teams they put together in years past, especially recent years, Drew Brees, and the Saints as a whole largely, are under a lot of pressure this season to get it done, because I really believe this is his last chance to get it done. Because even though he's looked great for a lot of the season, he is aging and he doesn't take care of himself in the same way that, say, 42-year-old Tom Brady does. So I think Drew Brees is under pressure just because they're arguably the best team in the league, at least top three, and I think this is his last chance to get it done and get Super Bowl number 2, especially with all the noise that's come out of New Orleans in recent years and this year.
I agree with that. There's only, I'd like to say also one of the things about Drew Brees that kind of puts him on the outside of the GOAT conversation despite all of his records is the fact that he's never won a regular season MVP. And I think that's a little insane to believe for someone who leads the NFL in all-time passing yards and maybe touchdowns. Does he lead the touchdowns? Yeah.
And he's won Offensive Player of the Year.
He's won Offensive Player of the Year, but he's never won an MVP, which I find ridiculous. And the only thing I want to say about your argument is John Elway is not in the GOAT conversation, but that's for another time. So as for the quarterback, or not the quarterback, but the player that's under the most pressure, I'm going to go to the AFC, and I agree Drew Brees is probably up there within the top 2 or 3 that are under the most pressure throughout these playoffs. I'm not going to disagree with anything you said because I completely agree with you about this being the last year and chance for him to do it despite all the success. I'm going to go with Lamar Jackson, and a lot of people may find that odd, and there's a couple reasons why I'm saying this. Obviously, they were 14-2 this year. They had the number 1 rushing offense in the NFL. He's probably going to win MVP. He had an unbelievable season, but people are questioning whether or not his style of play is sustainable. And if you take that into consideration and combine it with the fact that last year, with that beautiful way to end the regular season that he did with maybe a 6-0 or 6-1 record, I can't remember, he went into the playoffs and absolutely laid an egg against the Los Angeles Chargers. He had nothing for him. He had like 40 passing yards by the fourth quarter. He had absolutely nothing for the Chargers. So we saw his success last year in the regular season, and then it came to playoff time, and it was like, wow, he really dropped off by the playoffs. Now he has to answer those questions of why he dropped off in the playoffs, and he has to answer it with a playoff win. I expect this Ravens team to go to the AFC Championship game at the very least. With the first round bye, with home field, with the fact that they're the number 1 seed, they should beat anybody coming through M&T Bank Stadium, and there would be absolutely no excuse for Lamar Jackson not to do so, and he is under a lot of pressure to get that done.
See, I agree with everything you said, but I think the Ravens as a whole, especially Lamar Jackson, I wouldn't say they're under pressure or he's under pressure. I would just say the expectations are high. But the pressure isn't on for them to win a Super Bowl. Like, there's no real stakes if they don't get to the AFC Championship game or if they lose the Super Bowl. But for Drew Brees, his career, and of course the Saints as a whole, there are real stakes here because who knows? If he wins the Super Bowl, he might retire right off into the sunset. If not, maybe he comes back next year, doesn't look as good, all of a sudden he's hit the cliff, and he's in jeopardy of that GOAT top 5 quarterback conversation. The Ravens, it's just these expectations because of such a great regular season they had, but I wouldn't necessarily pin that on Lamar. If anything, I'd put the pressure more on John Harbaugh.
Fair enough. The only reason I would say The only reason I'm saying Lamar is under the most pressure is really because of what he did last year in the playoffs. If he had not done that, let's say they didn't make the playoffs last year, just for argument's sake, and they were 14-2 this year, I would agree with you. Then it's just high expectations. But because of how poorly he performed last year in the playoffs, I think a lot of pressure is on Lamar Jackson.